The scent of aged fabric, dust, and rusted metal filled her lungs, mingling with the faint tang of magic that hung thick in the air. Around her, the gathered crowd of tailors, apprentices, and rebels stood silent, faces etched with tension and cautious hope. This was a moment wrought with peril and promised the binding knot ritual, the last hope to stabilize the unraveling magic threatening to tear their world apart. Mara, the silent seamstress, moved with deliberate grace to the ancient loom at the chamber's center. Its massive wooden frame was carved with intricate patterns, some worn away by time, others still glowing faintly with residual power. Threads of light drifted from the loom spools, shimmering like stars caught in a web. This loom, Mara whispered, is the heart of the Threadwright's legacy. It can rewrite the very fabric of our magic, but only if the binding is strong enough. Elin's hands trembled slightly as she approached, her gaze locked on the glowing threads that awaited her touch. The responsibility pressed down like a heavy cloak. The fate of the rebellion, the future of fabric magic itself, rested on this fragile knot she was about to weave. Yet beneath the weight, a spark of determination flared bright. She was the descendant of the Threadwrights. She had the blood and the will to reshape their world. Beside her, Mara placed a steadying hand on Elin's shoulder. Remember, child, you are not alone. The strength of many threads makes the fabric unbreakable. Around the chamber, the disparate factions, outcast tailors, rebellious apprentices, and fringe weavers stood as a testament to the fragile alliance Elin had fought so hard to forge. Their eyes flicked between one another, some wary, others resolute. It was a binding not just of magic, but of trust, fragile yet vital. As Elin took her place at the loom, the chamber's torches flickered, casting long shadows that seemed to dance in time with the loom's quiet hum. She reached out, her fingers brushing the threads, glowing with ancient sigils. The warmth of the magic seeped into her skin, pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. With Mara's guiding voice murmuring forgotten incantations, Elin began to weave thread by thread, stitch by stitch, the pattern that would bind the magic once more. The glowing threads responded, intertwining with her own enchanted garment fragment, a symbol of her bloodline and legacy. Each movement was precise, the rhythm hypnotic, the air thick with the scent of ozone and aged fabric. The loom seemed to breathe with life, the patterns shifting and settling into a glowing tapestry that radiated warmth and power. Outside the chamber, Jorin and Silas stood vigilant. The distant echo of footsteps reverberated through the tunnels, a grim reminder that Guildmaster Varys's forces were closing in. Jorin's grip tightened on the hilt of his blade, while Silas's eyes flickered beneath his hood, ever watchful. The noose was tightening, and every second counted. Within the chamber, the ritual reached its crescendo. Elin's hands moved faster now, weaving a final knot that sealed the binding. With a deep breath, she tore a small fragment from her own enchanted garment, her legacy woven into the fabric fate itself. The threads flared brightly, then steadied into a steady golden glow that bathed the chamber in light. A collective breath was released. The gathered crowd shared a moment of quiet triumph and relief. The magic was stabilizing. The unraveling had been halted, if only for now, but the victory was bittersweet. The binding knot was a beacon, a challenge to those who wished to maintain control. Varys's shadow loomed larger than ever. Elin met Mara's gaze, both of them understanding the road ahead was fraught with danger. Yet in that moment, bound by magic and resolve, a new hope was woven into the kingdom's fabric. The binding knot was more than a ritual, it was a promise. As the chamber's glow faded into the cool shadows of the tunnels, Elin whispered to herself. We have bound the threads, but the war for the fabric's soul is just beginning. Outside, the footsteps grew louder, heralding the coming storm. The fragile alliance, the newly woven magic, and Elin's own courage would soon be tested like never before. Flickering lanterns cast long shadows against the cracked stone walls, painting the faces of those gathered in hues of amber and grey. Elin stood at the center, her gaze steady but weary as she listened to the rising storm of words. Joran's ideas will lead us into a trap. Mara's voice cut sharply through the tension, her hands clenched at her sides as she paced the room. We cannot afford caution when the guilds tighten their grip. We need bold moves, not endless deliberations. Joran, seated near the worn wooden table, met her glare with a calm that bordered on exhaustion. And reckless actions will only bring ruin faster. I've seen the guild's traps before, Mara. We must be methodical if we want to survive this. The room erupted into murmurs and whispers, alliances fracturing under the weight of fear and ambition. Elin raised a hand, her voice cutting through the cacophony like a silken thread pulling taut. Enough. The room settled, eyes turning to her as the silence thickened. We face a common enemy, she began, her words deliberate, not each other. The guilds have ruled Loomhaven for centuries by weaving fear and control into every stitch of this city. If we unravel ourselves now, the fabric of our rebellion will fray beyond repair. Mara's expression softened, but defiance still flickered in her eyes. We can't wait forever, Elin. Every day we delay, the guilds tighten their noose. Elin nodded, acknowledging the truth in the words, I know. But if we tear ourselves apart, there will be nothing left to fight for. We must find balance between boldness and caution, between hope and realism. Joran rose slowly, the lines of age creasing his face in the dim light. She's right, he said quietly. Our strength lies in our unity. We can find a path that honors both caution and courage. The air shifted as a fragile truth settled over the room. Yet, beneath the surface, old wounds ached and rival ambitions pulsed like a hidden seam threatening to split open. Later that night, Elin found herself wandering the rain-slicked streets of Loomhaven alone. The city's familiar scents of wet fabric and burning hearths mingled with the distant echo of whispered plots and clandestine footsteps. Her cloak clung to her slender frame, the threads heavy with moisture as she traced the outline of the city she sought to change. Her mind replayed the day's conflicts, the sharp words exchanged, and the fragile agreements forged. The rebellion was a tapestry woven from countless threads, each one vital, each one vulnerable. A soft voice interrupted her solitude. Elin, she turned to see Mara stepping out from the shadows, her auburn hair damp and eyes cautious but earnest. I shouldn't have spoken so harshly, Mara admitted, her voice low. The guild's threat terrifies me, but so does the thought of losing what we're building here. Elin smiled faintly, the tension between them easing like the loosening of a tight stitch. We all carry our fears, Mara, but together, our threads are stronger than any guilds we've did. Two women stood in the quiet night, the city around them a tapestry of light and shadow. In that moment, tentative trust began to mend the frayed edges of their alliance. As dawn approached, Elin returned to the hideout, the weight of leadership heavier but tempered by renewed hope. The guild's looming menace remained, a dark pattern etched deep into Loomhaven's fabric. But for now, the rebellion held fast, its threads bound tighter against the coming storm. Yet, Elin knew this fragile piece was but a single stitch in a vast, unfolding tapestry. The true test of their unity was yet to come. and the choices made in the days ahead would determine whether their cause unraveled or endured. With resolve hardening like the first light of morning, Elin prepared to face the challenges that awaited, knowing that only by weaving together strength, trust, and sacrifice could they hope to remake the kingdom of threads. Elin's words lingered in the air as the coalition breathed anew. But the fraying edges of loyalty whispered warnings of trials yet to come. The guilds, watching from their shadowed towers, tightened their grip, unseen, but ever present, while the threads of rebellion wove tighter, fragile yet unbroken. The alley behind her, with its familiar grime and the faint scent of dyed cloth, faded into nothingness, replaced by a vast expanse woven from threads of light and shadow. She stepped forward, her boots silent on the ethereal ground that felt both solid and insubstantial at once. Whisper fluttered close, its silver-threaded wings catching the radiant glow, casting prismatic sparks into the surrounding twilight. The realm of the Loom of Fate unfolded around her realm she had only heard of in whispered legends and cryptic fragments. It was not a place of stone or wood, but a living fabric, an enormous tapestry that stretched infinitely in every direction. Threads of myriad colors twisted and intertwined, each one pulsing with a subtle rhythm, as if breathing. The very air vibrated with a melody she felt in her bones, a song sung by the universe itself. Elin's heart pounded as she ventured deeper. The threads shifted beneath her gaze, weaving patterns that spoke of histories lost, futures unmade, and the fragile present she now inhabited. Whisper chirped softly, sensing the weight of the moment, its eyes gleaming with quiet encouragement. Suddenly, from the shifting mists emerged figures unlike any Elin had ever seen. They moved fluidly, their forms woven from strands of light and shadow, flickering and reforming like living embroidery. The Loom guardian keepers of the tapestry, protectors of the sacred weave. Their faces were simultaneously alien and familiar, beautiful and unsettling. Eyes like spun starlight fixed upon Elin, assessing, probing her very essence. A voice echoed not, a voice spoken aloud, but a chorus of woven whispers that filled her mind. Why do you come, child of the Threadwrights? What seek you within the warp and weft of destiny? Elin stood tall despite the surge of fear that threatened to unravel her resolve. I seek understanding. To save my world, I must know the true nature of fabric magic. I must learn how to mend what has been torn. The guardians moved closer, their forms rippling like silk in a storm. A test began not of skill alone, but of spirit and heart. Threads of light braided and unbraided around Elin, each strand a challenge to her will, her fears, her hopes. She faced visions of the ancient Threadwrights, their greatness and their downfall. She felt the weight of countless lives bound into the fabric she sought to protect. At one moment, she was lost in a labyrinth of tangled threads, suffocating in doubt and despair. Yet, with whispered encouragement from Whisper and her own fierce determination, she pulled herself free, unraveling the knots of uncertainty. As the trial waned, the tapestry around her brightened, revealing glimpses of what fabric magic truly was. Not merely spells embroidered into cloth, but a living, breathing force connecting all things. Every thread linked beings, moments, choices, an intricate web where even the smallest tug could ripple across worlds. Elin felt a profound shift within herself, a merging of knowledge and power that filled her with both awe and responsibility. The Loom Guardians bowed their shifting forms in recognition. You carry the legacy of the Threadwrights and the burden of the weave. Guard it well, for the fate of many threads now rests in your hands. The realm began to dissolve, the threads retracting like the closing of a vast eye. Elin found herself back in the alley. The sounds of Loomhaven, faint but real, the distant clatter of a cart, the murmur of voices, the rustle of fabric in the wind. Whisper perched on her shoulder, its glow a steady beacon. She drew a deep breath, the weight of the loom of fate's revelations settling over her like a cloak. The path ahead was daunting, but now she understood more clearly the stakes and the true power she wielded. The threads of revolution, of healing, and of transformation were hers to weave. Elin's eyes sharpened with resolve as she stepped forward into the unfolding dawn, ready to meet whatever challenges awaited with the strength of the living fabric itself coursing through her veins. And yet, as the first light kissed the city's rooftops, a whisper of doubt lingered, a question that would haunt her steps. Could one person truly reweave the fate of an entire kingdom? The journey was far from over. The warp and weft of destiny awaited her touch, and Elin knew that every stitch would count. Threads of silver and indigo shimmered beneath their careful fingers, weaving into patterns that had not been spoken of in ages. Merrin's voice was low and steady, guiding Elin through the intricate dance of the new weave. "This is no ordinary fabric," he murmured. "This weave will sever the sigils that bind the guild's magic. It will cut their control at the source." Elin's heart pounded with a mixture of awe and trepidation. The weight of the legacy she carried pressed upon her as she threaded the last strand with deliberate precision. "If this works," she whispered, "it could unravel everything they've built. But what if it tears the magic apart for good?" Merrin's eyes met hers, steady and firm. "That risk is ours to bear. The old ways have suffocated us. It's time for a new pattern." Hours slipped by unnoticed as the two worked, the loom's rhythmic clatter echoing like a heartbeat in the quiet room. Outside, the city slept under a shroud of uneasy calm, unaware of the revolution quietly taking shape within these walls. Meanwhile, in the labyrinthine corridors of the guilds, Yarick moved like a shadow, his footsteps muffled by the thick carpets enchanted to detect intruders. Every breath was measured, every glance calculated. He had one chance to plant the delicate threads of Elin's new weave into the heart of the guild's magical Cora place, where the ancient sigils that governed their power pulsed like veins beneath marble floors. The tension was palpable as he approached the central chamber. Threads of magic shimmered in the air, forming a dense web of enchantment. Yarick's fingers trembled slightly as he reached into his satchel, retrieving the carefully prepared bundle. With a silent prayer, he began to braid the new weave into the existing magic, feeling the resistance and then, slowly, the shift. Back in the workshop, Elin awaited news with clenched fists and a restless spirit. When Yarick's coded signal finally flickered through the enchanted mirror, relief washed over her, but it was fleeting. They had only just begun. The following day, a summons arrived from the Grand Hall. Elin found herself face to face with Guildmaster Vorik, whose crimson robes seemed to drink the light from the room. His gaze was cold, his voice dripping with veiled menace. "You toy with forces you do not understand, girl. The guilds are the weavers of this world's fate. You would unravel the tapestry and leave us all in tatters." Elin squared her shoulders, the new weave subtly pulsing beneath her patched cloak. "The tapestry is already torn, Gil. It's time to sew a new pattern, one of freedom, not control." Varric's eyes narrowed, but before he could reply, the room trembled. The air vibrated as the new weave spread invisibly, unraveling the sigils that had long shackled the kingdom's magic. Tapestries flickered, their enchantments faltering. The guild's power waned as threads of light cascaded through the city's magical network. Chaos erupted. The guild elders scrambled to contain the unraveling magic, but the weave held fast. Elin's heart surged with hope, yet she knew this was but the first cut in a long battle. Night fell again, and the city's fabric magic pulsed with new possibility. Elin stood on a rooftop overlooking Loom Haven, the glowing threads of the new weave weaving through the streets like lifeblood restored. "This is only the beginning," she whispered to the wind, readying herself for the trials yet to come. The cut and the sew marked a turning point, not just in the rebellion, but in the very nature of fabric magic itself. Elin's bold act unraveled centuries of control, but wove in threads of freedom and uncertainty. The kingdom's fate, like the threads in her hands, was now hers to shape. As dawn painted the sky with hues of rose and gold, Elin's resolve hardened. The guilds would not surrender easily, and the cost of this new weave had yet to be borne. But for the first time in a long time, the future shimmered with possibility and intricate pattern waiting to be sewn anew. The ruins of the warehouse groaned under the weight of centuries-old timbers. The shadows alive with the flickering light of enchanted lanterns held tight in trembling hands. Around her, the murmurs of her allies mingled with the distant clatter of footsteps and the eerie rustle of fabrica, sound that twisted and writhed unnaturally, as if the very cloth had sprouted tendrils and teeth. Marek was beside her, eyes wide but steady, clutching a spindly silver needle that shimmered faintly with woven enchantments. "There," he whispered, pointing toward the center of the room where a grotesque shape writhed beneath tattered velvets and silk. The monstrous garment pulsed and stretched, a mass of corrupted threads that twisted like serpents, each strand alive with dark magic. Elin's heart hammered. This was no ordinary enemy, was a nightmare woven from the forbidden spells the guilds had long hidden, now unleashed in desperation. She could see the faint glimmers of sigils etched into the fabric's surface, glowing with a sickly green light that made her skin crawl. "Hold steady," she urged, her voice low but firm. "We don't fight with brute force. This thing feeds on fear and chaos. We unravel it, thread by thread." Marek nodded, stepping forward with the needle poised. As the creature lunged, Elin reached into her cloak and drew a spool of silver thread, humming softly with a counter-magic taught by Seela. The outcast tailor's lessons echoed in her mind. The ancient art of unweaving corrupted magics, a delicate dance of precision and intuition. The battle was a blur of motion and magic. The twisted garment lashed out with tendrils that hissed like vipers, each strike tearing at the air and the resolve of the rebels. But Elin and Marek worked in tandem, weaving patterns of light and shadow, severing the dark threads that bound the creature's form. Sweat stung her eyes, the metallic scent of unraveling magic thick in the air. Finally, with a shuddering gasp, the corrupted fabric collapsed into a heap of inert cloth, the malevolent glow extinguished. Silence fell, broken only by ragged breaths. "We can't keep doing this," Marek said, his voice tight with exhaustion. "They're making more darker things." Elin's gaze hardened. "Then we learn faster. We fight smarter." Their respite was short-lived. Word came swiftly from the city's tallest spire, where Guildmaster Lysera stood like a dark queen cloaked in obsidian robes that seemed to writhe with a life of their own. From her vantage, she unleashed a devastating wave of fabric magic, a tempest of black silk and shadow that tore through the rebel encampment. Elin watched from the safety of the ruined warehouse, heart pounding as the sky darkened with the Guildmaster's wrath. The ground shook beneath the onslaught, and cries of alarm echoed as enchanted garments turned against their wearers, corrupted beyond recognition. Yet, amidst the chaos, Elin found a spark of hope. Sela appeared at her side, the outcast's eyes fierce and steady. "There is a way," she said urgently. "An ancient technique to cleanse the weave, to mend the torn threads before they consume us all. But it will require everything you have and more." Under Sila's stern guidance, Elin began the painstaking process of mastering the cleansing weave. The air crackled with raw energy as they worked, strands of pure magic intertwining with the frayed edges of corrupted fabric. The scent of herbs and old parchment filled the room, mingling with the electric temps of power. Each success brought relief, but also the weight of the growing threat. The guilds were relentless, their corrupted creations multiplying with each encounter. Elin's leadership was tested as never before. She balanced hope and fear, strategy and sacrifice, forging a path through the tangled threads of war. In quieter moments, she tended to the wounded friends and strangers alike under the soft glow of enchanted lanterns. Their faces bore the marks of battle and exhaustion, yet their eyes shone with the fierce light of determination. "We will win this," Elin whispered, clasping a trembling hand. "For the Threadwrights, for the future we fight to weave." But as the shadows lengthened and the city held its breath, one question remained. How long before the tangled threads of magic and betrayal pulled them all into the abyss? The battle was far from over. The guilds had shown their darkest hand, and Elin knew that to survive, she must unravel the secrets hidden deep within the fabric of their power and herself. With allies at her side and courage in her heart, she stepped forward into the unknown, ready to weave the fate of a kingdom. And somewhere in the depths of Loomhaven, the threads began to twist anew.